Why emotionless people are so powerful. The hidden advantage nobody talks about is something strange about certain people. You have seen them before, maybe in a boardroom or on a battlefield, or simply standing quietly in a room full of chaos. Do not raise their voice, Thithi. Do not panic, Thith. Do not crumble when the world pushes against the mind. Yet something about them draws every eye in the room. Something about them commands a silence that no one can fully explain. You feel it before you understand it, a kind of invisible gravity pulling attention toward them without effort, without performance, without noise. These are not always the most talented people in the room. They are not always the most educated or the most connected or the ones who have been handed the most advantaged, but there is something underneath the surface of who they are, something cold and quiet and immovably, and it gives them a power that most people will spend their entire lives chasing without ever knowing what it is. Today, we are going to look directly into that mystery, are going to examine what actually happens inside the minds of emotionally controlled people. The world bends toward them in ways it does not bend toward others, and what the ancient and the modern and the psychological all seem to agree on, which is this person who masters their inner world becomes a force in the outer one. Stay with Usbus. What you are about to hear may quietly change the way you see everything. Part 1. Invisible war being fought inside every human mind. Most people believe they are rational. They believe their decisions come from careful thinking, from weighing options, from logic and reason and measured judgment. But science has spent decades dismantling that belief, and the picture that emerges is far stranger, far more unsettling than most people are comfortable admitting. Her is what researchers have found. Your emotional brain makes decisions first before conscious thought even arrives on the beneath part of your mind that thinks in feelings, in fear and desire and belonging and threat. It part fires first. It chooses, it reacts, it moves the body, and only afterward does the logical mind show up like a lawyer arriving after the verdicto, explain why what just happened was the right call all along. This is not a flaw in human designate, was once survival in a world of predators and scarce food and constant physical danger. The body that reacted fastest liveth, one that paused to think often did not, but that ancient wiring now lives inside a modern world, a world where the threats are usually not physical, where the right response to most problems is not immediate action but careful thought, and the mismatch between ancient programming and modern reality creates a kind of invisible war inside every single human being. On one side stands the emotional mind, fast and powerful and ancient and compelling, screaming that everything is urgent thought, the threat is real thought. Other side stands the reflective mind, slow and deliberate and capable of seeing past the moment, bet easily, overwhelmedly, silency easily, drowned out by the noise of the emotional brain. When it rise, most people live their entire lives dominated by one side of this war. They are carried by their emotions like a small boat on a very large ocean, blown in whatever direction the feeling of the moment decides. They do not choose their responses. They inherit the demand. They wonder why life feels like something that is happening to them rather than something they are shaping. But there are others, and these others have discovered something the rest of the world has forgotten, perhaps never knew. They have discovered that inside the gap between feeling something and doing something there exists, a space, and inside that space lives something that resembles freedom. Emotional brain says act now. Reflective mind says wait, and in that waiting, in that stillness between storm and responses, where power is born, it the kind of power that is loud, not the kind that announces itself, bet the quiet, kindled, deep kindled kind that moves through decades instead of moments and reshapes everything it touches. Part 20. The calmest person in the room terrifies everyone else. You have been in a room when something went wrong. Maybe it was a workplace crisis, maybe it was a moment of public conflict, asterisk maybe it was a family gathering that suddenly turned into something no one planned for, and you watched how people reacted. Some got louder, some got quieter and smaller, some reached for blame, some reached for escapade. Then maybe you noticed one person who did none of these things. They sat or stood or moved through the chaos as if it existed in a different dimension from where they were. They spoke when it was useful to speak and stayed silent when silence served better. They assessed before they acted. In when they did act, there was a precision to eat away at the frantic movement of everyone else entirely lacked in. You noticed something interesting. The room began to organize itself around that person, not because they demanded it, but because humans in chaos instinctively search for a signal, a sign that someone somewhere knows what is happening. And calm is that signal. Calm says, I have seen worse than this. Calm says, I am not afraid of this outcome. Calm says, I am operating from something deeper than fear, and the effect this has on other people is not smell, it is enormous. Bez when human beings are frightened, they are looking for something to anchor to, something stable in the middle of the instability, and the person who provides that anchor without effort, without performance, without the need for recognition, books in that moment something close to indispensably, is why throughout history certain leaders did not need to be the loudest voices in the room. They did not need to perform strength. They did not need to intimidate or threaten or demand loyalty. Their composure was the communication. Their stillness was the message, and the message was thesis. Am larger than this situation, and people who feel larger than their situations draw others toward themth way. Gravity draws matter quickly, countantly, needing to try asterisk. Part 3. Secret psychology behind emotional mysteria. There is a concept in psychology called emotional regulation. It is not a complicated idea, but its implications are enormous. Emotional regulation is simply the ability to experience an emotion without being completely controlled by it. Feel the feeling and then decide what to do with it rather than letting the feeling decide for you. And what research has consistently shown this, that people who develop strong emotional regulation tend to make better decisions, build stronger relationships, secrecy, less anxiety over time, and perform significantly better under pressure than those who have not developed this skill. But here is the part that most people do not fully understand. Emotionally regulated people are not people who feel less. They are not cold. They are not numb. They are not people who have cut off access to their inner experience. In fact, many of the most emotionally regulated people are also among the most sensitive. Difference is not in what they feel, it is in what they do with what they feel. Imagine to people who receive devastating criticism in front of a group. First person feels the sting of it, and the feeling immediately becomes action. Their face changes, their voice changes. They defend, or they attack, or they collapse. Emotion runs through them without resistance, like electricity through a wire with no insulations. Second person feels the exact same. Stingmabe, even more deep-libbed, something different happens next. There is an internal pausia moment of observation, as if a part of their mind steps back and watches the feeling arriving without immediately becoming item that posithe have a choice or not about whether to feel but about what to do next, and that choice of that tiny fraction of space between stimulus and responses, where character is built, where wisdom is stored, where power accumulates. Psychists call this metacognition. Think about your own thinking, watching your own emotional process from a slight distance. The people who develop this capacity a little find that their emotions begin to feel less like forces that happen to the mind, more like information thought arrives that can be considered and then acted upon or note at their choosing. Part 4th. Ancient warning. No one is telling you about modern life. Here is something that should quietly disturb you. There are industries right now to employ some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, and those minds have one primary objective: make your emotional reactions as fast and as powerful and as uncontrollable as possible, not because that is good for you, but because it is extraordinarily profitable. Verdes have known for more than a century that emotional decisions drive purchasing, that fear of missing out, or fear of judgment, or desire for status, or the ache of loneliness, so products far more effectively than rational benefit ever could. But what has changed in the last 2 decades is the precision technology now available to trigger emotional responses is almost incomprehensibly sophisticated. Attention is tracked, your reactions are measured. Content that makes you feel the most intensely is amplified. The feedback loop is relentless. Media companies do not profit from you being calm and thoughtful. They profit from you being engaged in. Nothing creates engagement like outrage, fear, envy, the rush of righteous anger. So the architecture is built to produce exactly those feelings of and over until your emotional reactions become so practiced, so reflexive, so automatic, you begin to lose the ability to pause at Allen. This is the warning hidden inside the mystery of emotionally controlled people, because the person whose emotions are easy to trigger us, also the person who is easy to lead, easy to sell, toasy, to manipulatize, to keep in a loop of reaction and consumption that serves other people far more than it serves them. Person who has developed emotional control can feel the pull of outrage or fear or desiring, then pause and ask whether this feeling is being manufactured, whether this reaction is being engineered, whether this is actually what they think or just what they are being made to feel. That person becomes in a very real sense ungovernable in the chaotic way, not in the way that creates destruction, but in the way that creates independence, way that allows a person to move through the world on their own terms rather than dancing to rhythms set by other sand. That kind of freedom is rarer than it has ever been. Part 5th. Philosophy that survived empires and still works today. More than 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece and Rome, a group of thinkers developed a philosophy that was quietly revolutionary. They were called the Stoics, and what they understood about the human mind was so precise, so practically useful, that it shaped emperors and soldiers, and philosophers survives today because it still works. Stoics began with a simple observationist: human suffering does not come from events themselves. Self comes from our judgment of those events, from our interpretation from the story we tell ourselves about what has happened and what it means a person loses their job. One mind says, this is the end, this is disasturthis, is proof that I am not inugand. Another mind says, this is information, this is a change in direction, this is the closing of one door and the opening of something I cannot yet see. Event is I. Suffering is entirely different. What creates the difference is not luck or talent or circumstance, it is the internal architecture of interpretation, it is the story being told inside it. Stoics called this working with the judgment that between the thing that happens and the meaning we give, ithia is always a choice aways, a space aways, a possibility of a different responsive. Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during some of its most violent and chaotic years. Wrote privately about this practicable, how he would wake each morning and remind himself that the day would bring difficulty, thought simply the world being the world, and his job was not to resist the world, but to respond to it wisely. What is remarkable is that he was not writing advice for others, was writing for himself, minding himself of what he already believed. Beckos even. For Heimven, for a man who had spent decades training his Mindy, emotional pull of the world was constant reminder, had to be constant tuned. This is the quiet truth the Stoics offer. Use emotional mastery is not a destination you arrive at and then stay out, is a practitia daily, returning to the centera constant choice to interpret before you react. And what makes it powerful is precisely that it is difficult, because the things that are difficult to develop are the things that few people actually develop, and rare qualities. The Stoics well understood they're the foundation of genuine power. Part 6. What? Elite performers know that ordinary people spend their whole lives ignoring. If you study the highest performers across almost any demanding field, you will find a pattern. It does not matter whether you are looking at Olympic athletes or military special operations units or elite surgeons or the founders of transformative companies, all train something beyond the physical or technical skill of their craft. They all train the ability to function when the mind wants to fall apart. Back as performance under pressure is a completely different thing from performance in comfort. Almost anyone can do well when conditions are favorable. The stakes are low. One failure carries no real cost. One, the body is rested and the mind is combat. Remove those conditions, said real consequenced fatigued public scrutiny, the weight of everything depending on this single moment. And most people find that the skill they trained in comfort does not fully survive the arrival of pressure. The body tensest mind, narrow satintion, fragments the very faculties they need must begin to collapse under the weight of the emotional response to the situation. And this is why elite performers do not simply train skills, they train the environment inside themselves. They deliberately create pressure in practice. They expose themselves to discomfort repeatedly, to punish themselves, but to teach the nervous system that discomfort is survivablato. Widen the window of what they can tolerate without losing functiona. Pilot trains emergencies, not because emergencies are common, but so that when an emergency arrives, emotional response has already been practiced, and the practiced response is calm and methodical and effective rather than panicked and fragmented and dangerous. A surgeon trains to be emotionally present during procedures that would overwhelm most people, not by suppressing feeling, but by developing A relationship with high-stakes situations that allows clarity to coexist with pressure. And what all of them report. One, you ask them honestly about what separates the best from the rest. Is not superior talented, is superior emotional management, ability to feel the acknowledge the pressure and then continue to function at a high level anyway. Feel what everyone else feels. Have just built the internal architecture to move through it rather than being stopped by it. Part 7th, shadow side of the story and why it matters. But there is something important that must be said. Here is empty, that easy narratives about emotional strength tend to leave out because there is a version of what we have been describing. Is not strength at a lit, is together, are people who appear emotionally controlled not because they have developed mastery but because they have learned to disconnect from feeling entirely, perhaps through early experiences that made feeling too dangerouser, through environments that punished emotional expression so consistently that the only option that seemed safe was to stop expressing even to stop feeling at least consciously. These people can look very similar from the outside. Same stillness, same apparent calm, same unreadable expression in moments of pressure, but inside the something entirely different is happening. More precisely, not happening because emotions that are buried do not disappear, do not dissolve, do not stop having influence over behavior. Simply go underground, and underground emotions find other exits. Emerge as chronic anxiety that seems to have no sources, sudden irrational outbursts that arrive without obvious causes, physical symptoms, a flatness in relationships, an inability to feel genuine joy, and exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. Peekaboo acquired to keep everything buried us in normas and constant and ultimately unsustainable. Ancient Stoics were actually very clear about this distinction. Did not advocate for the absence of emotion. Advocated for wisdom in relation to emotion, for feeling what needed to be felt and releasing what needed to be released, while maintaining the capacity to choose responses. Thoughtful legaling emotional mastery includes the ability to grieve. When grief is appropriato, be moved by beautito, feel the full weight of love, and losto, be present inside the experience of being alive without being enslaved by any single feeling. Strongest people are not the ones who feel the least, are the ones who feel without losing themselves. Can be inside a powerful emotion experience it fully and then return to themselves afterward intactly for what comes next, and that distinction matters. Deepalibus. The goal is not to become less human, it is to become more completely yourself in the face of everything that life sends. Part ATA, different way of seeing yourself in time. Here is something unusual to consider. Most people experience their emotions as events that are happening right now. Anger is not something that was triggered by something that happened at it is just anger presently out. Fear is not a response to a perception, it is simply fearing. It is everything but emotionally powerful people have developed something that looks almost like time travel. Are able to experience the present moment and simultaneously hold a longer view to feel the urgency of no while also knowing that now will become that this feeling which seems permanent will eventually pass, that this situation which seems totalist actually one scene in a very long. Stoics practiced something they called the view from above mental exercise, in which they would zoom out, imagining themselves from a great height, watching their life as a small part of an enormous landscape The problem that seemed consuming from close up would become what it actually wasn't. Momentum 1. Life fine. One brief period of a world that had existed long before the mind would continue long. After this is not a strategy for dismissing the importance of what you are experiencing. It is a strategy for maintaining perspective, for preventing any single moment from becoming. The whole story on there is a related practice which involves imagining how you will feel about this moment 1 year from now, 5 years from now, at the end of your life, and not to avoid the feeling but to give it its proper size, because so many of the things that feel enormous in the moment feel very different when measured against timid. The people who have developed the habit of asking this matter in 10 years find that most of what consumed them yesterday already feels smaller to die in. This longer relationship with time, this ability to hold the moment and the arc simultaneously, is part of what makes emotionally controlled people seem so unbothered by things that destroy others. It is not that they do not create, is that they have placed what is happening inside a frame large enough to hold it without being overwhelmed by it. Part 9th. Relationship between emotional mastery and genuine influence. There is a common misunderstanding about power, which is that it comes from making yourself impossible to ignore, from volume, from dominance, from occupying so much space that others have no choice but to respond to Ewan. This works for a while and in certain contexts, but it is the kind of power that is always fighting for its needing to be re-established, always vulnerable to someone louder or more aggressive or more willing to go further. Genuine influence of kind that lasts, kind that people describe when they say someone changed their life, most never looks like that. It is quieter. It comes from the perception that the person before you is not performing are not managing how they appear are not fighting for dominance are simply presented clear and grounded in something that the noise of the room cannot touch. Chuan, you are around someone like this, you feel it in a way you may not be able to fully articulate. Is a sense that they are not hiding, that what you see is what is their thought. They do not need anything from you in the way most people do. Box. They are not running from themselves. Send this is disarming in a profound way, because most social interaction is shaped by mutual need. Managementarian is managing their image, managing how they are perceived, managing what others think of the mind. Underneath all that management is a kind of anxiety, a constant low-level performance, and when you encounter someone who is not performing, zomi, who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide, the difference is immediately felt. Even if it is not consciously named, you trust them before you know why. Woo, listen to them differently, will give their words a weight you do not give to others. And this is the deep connection between emotional mastery and genuine influence base. When your emotional security is internal, it does not depend on constant validation from outside. Become genuinely free in your interactions with others who can afford to tell the truth, because your sense of self does not collapse when the truth is unwelcome. You can afford to be wrong, because your identity is not built on being right. You can afford to let others take the credit, because your inner experience does not require the recognition. And paradoxically, these qualities attract more trust, more loyalty, more genuine connection than any performance of confidence or dominance ever could. Part 10. The practice that changes everything. So, how does a person actually build this peekaboo? Understanding the concept is one thing done. Living it is another, and the honest answer is that it does not happen through insight alone. You cannot simply understand emotional mastery and then have to practice it the same way that a body is built through repeated physical stress and a skill is built through repeated deliberate effort. Emotional regulation is built through repeated contact with difficulty and the deliberate choice to practice a different responsive. First practice is also the simplest and the most powerful, and it is the spousebore. You react, create even a single breath of space between what you feel and what you do, because in that breath, entire game changes. Emotional brain has sent its signal, but you have not yet obeyed. In that space, even for a moment, you have access to the part of your mind that can choose its. Second practice is observation. A strong emotion arrives instead of becoming it. Practice watching it, not suppressing it but witnessing it. Way you might watch whether moving through a sky. It is there, right? Is real. It may be powerful, but you are the sky, not the weather, and this distinction held even imperfectly consistently being to change your relationship with your own inner experience. Third practice is reducing what might be called emotional junk food. Constant stream of outrage and anxiety and manufactured urgent sight that most media and social platforms feed into the nervous system. This content does not inform you, it inflames you, and a nervous system in a constant state of inflammation is a nervous system that cannot regulate well. Spending less time in those more time in ones that do not require your nervous system to be in a constant state of alarmness, not avoidance, is maintenance. Fourth practice is using small discomforts as training, not dramatic suffering, not punishment, but the deliberate choice to do the hard thing before the easy oneto. Hold the discomfort a little longer before reaching for the relief dough. Finish the task before the reward best. Every time you do this, you are not just completing the task, you are training the part of your mind that knows it can endure, and that training compounds over time into something remarkably a deep background sense that you can handle what comes back as you have practiced handling what was uncomfortable. This background sense, this quiet confidence beneath the surfaces, what keeps people grounded when the difficult moments arrive. The fifth practice is the one most people avoid. It is simply to accept that some things cannot be changed, not as defeat, not as resignation, but as a fundamental act of clarity. So much emotional energy is spent fighting the unchangeablest, what has already happened, arguing with realistic stosting, the system trying to make the past different, and all of that energy relibusums available for what can actually be done, what exists, no what can be shaped, what is genuinely within the reach of choices. Stoics called this distinguishing between what is up to us and what is not, and it is perhaps the most liberating practice that has ever been. Describe Becky's the moment you stop fighting for control over what was never yours to control you. Suddenly have enormous energy available for the things that era closing have traveled a long way together in this from the ancient architecture of the emotional brain to the quiet gravity of calm in a room full of chaos, from the manipulation built into the platforms that surround us every day to the philosophy of emperors and the training of elite performers, from the shadow side of emotional suppression to the deep connection between inner security and genuine influence, and through all of Ita, single thread, a single quiet truth that the person who has learned to sit with themselves vesto, feel without obeying to, observe without pause where others react. That person moves through the world differing not because they feel less bought, because they have built something inside themselves that holds something that does not collapse under the weight of the difficult something, that returns to center after being displaced. Something quiet and patient and enduring that becomes more powerful over time. Not lest world will keep producing pressure. Thought is what the world does. It will send fear and urgency and loss and disappointment and the opinions of others and the noise of 10,000 competing voices of it, asking for your reactional of it, pulling at the oldest and most automatic parts of who you arraigned. The question is not whether you will feel it will. The question is what you will do with the space between the feeling and the response, because that space, that small and invisible and profoundly important spaces where your life is actually being maddened in the events that are evaned, in the circumstances, in the luck or the timing or the things you were given or not given, but in the choices you make moment after moment after moment after moment inside the quiet that no one else can, seeing a world that has become addicted to reaction. The rarest thing you can cultivate, the ability to be still in that stillness, that patient, unmovable groundedness is not a retreat from power. It is the source of it to do not control what happens, it to control what happens next, and that when truly understood, when truly lived, may be the greatest power available to a human being.